In this panel, we want to talk about what it's like to be, in the regional office, what sort of unique challenges that presents. Michelle, I'll start with you because you are coordinating efforts all over Southeast and maybe even beyond that. So feel free to expand on that. But how do you get everybody on the same page? What are those challenges like?
So my organization, I'm in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management, and we provide the administrative services to our 17 client agencies. So in Department of Labor, to name a few, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census, partner with them, Employment and Training Administration, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Employment Benefit and Services Administration. So these folks are tasked with very important responsibilities directly supporting the American workforce. And in our organization, we're doing the administrative things so they don't have to think about those things. So in administration, you want to make sure that people are getting the same messages. I'll give you an example. In 2018, you remember that the Office of Personnel Management rolled out some new weather and safety leave policies. Well, in this region, for Department of Labor, we're 8 states from Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, North and South Carolina, Florida. So you've got Kentucky that gets some weather in the wintertime. We just had some this past couple weeks. Florida is hurricane season. You get bad storms down there. So what are the new weather and safety leave policies? How do they affect me and my office and my employees when something happens and maybe I can't make it to work? So we partnered with our national office and the work life group there to provide training to all of our Department of Labor employees across the country. Now, not only were there national trainings, but we'll do specific trainings for Department of Labor employees in the Southeast region. And one of the things that we've done over the past 5 years is change the expectation of how training is delivered. So many of us, as I look around the room, we're kind of old school, and training was delivered. You went to a room and it was in person, and that's how we did it. And we've moved folks to, we're doing training virtually. We're using WebEx, we're using teleconferencing, and we've also gotten a lot better at servicing and delivering that information and sending out information in terms of this is when we're going to have the training, save the date, sending out reminders. I'm the person that sends it out for our region, and I find that the reminder that I send out the morning of the training is the one that I get the most response to. So learning how we need to interact with our folks, interact with our managers so that they're making sure that people are getting the information so that we all are on the same page. When we roll out new ways of doing business, we rolled out a new workers' compensation program. So if you're injured on the job, how do you let us know and let the system know that this is happening to you? Again, using virtual training, partnering with our national office to make sure that we have a consistent message and that we're all on the same page.
Kim, I want you to follow up on that for me because I know you all, and you can give a little bit of background about what you do, but you all deal with disaster response, and as far as I know, disasters aren't limited to the immediate Atlanta metro area, so you are sort of spread all over the place. How do you ensure that you have the resources to deal with that, and also the knowledge base so that you are ready to go whenever a situation comes up?
Yeah, and so just a background, I work with the Small Business Administration, and I work in the Office of Disaster Assistance, which is different than the entrepreneurial ring. And my office, we cover the 27 states east of the Mississippi River to include Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So I cover FEMA regions 1 through 5, if you are familiar with the FEMA construct. So you can see that I got a large territory that we cover. So how do I prepare myself? Because we got people all over the U.S. now, in Puerto Rico for the earthquakes. We got people still left over from Maria. We got people in Mississippi with the flooding. We've got folks everywhere. So how do I prepare? And I think that, the one thing regionally you got to understand is that you can't bring everybody in the room like this. You can't say, okay, everybody come in, let's have a meeting and let's talk about it, right? So you got to invest in technology. You got to be able to do some distant learning. You got to invest in Skype is the best thing ever, So you got to utilize the technology. But other than the technology trying to get your message out, how do you know that what you said, the directives that you put out, how did you know that they got to the lowest level, right? And so you got to have follow-ups. So you just can't have meetings to have meetings, right? So I'm going to give a couple things. One is routine. Discipline yourself in your routines. If you don't have a routine, then when crisis hit, you're going to fail. So you got to be routine, okay? Your situational awareness. What are your reporting procedures? What are the products and tools that you use? So if you got a routine and you got the products and the tools and the reports to keep you situationally aware, that's great. And Michelle mentioned knowledge. What is your knowledge base? Where's your repository of information? Whether we got a lot of new tools now. We got OneDrive and we got, a lot of collaborative tools. Are you maximizing that? And can your employees go anywhere to get changes? It's not an email, send it out, blast it to everybody, but can they go and look at what's the latest numbered memo? Can they go and look at what's the changes in policies and procedures? So routine, being situationally aware, and then making sure that your message is getting to the lowest level by having some knowledge base, some knowledge management program is key.
So I guess it pays to have as few surprises as you can have, when you're dealing with an evolving new situation, so that a lot of that's structured in advance.
Exactly. We do disaster response, and I would tell you no disaster is the same. Right. And if I'm struggling trying to get my routines and getting my managers and employees to follow routines, then I'm already failed. So with operating there, you got to have structure, and then you can respond to the crisis.
Nick, you're coming at this a little bit different perspective from law enforcement. There's probably a lot of different directions you could go. But how do you deal with sort of jurisdictional issues with, you're here in this region, cases you might be involved in might not be limited to that, or you might have multi-layers of law enforcement involved. How do you sort of wrap your head around that and make sure that, things stay on the right path?
I'm not sure that I do. No. So yeah, it's a complex sort of issue. I think, you talk about everyone on the stage kind of covering large regions. So I was the deputy special agent in charge in our office in San Diego, had about 600 employees there, but all in one county. And then I came to Atlanta to be the special agent in charge, and now it's 350 employees spread across 4 states with 12 offices, and it becomes a much more complex issue with fewer employees. So trying to kind of bring all of that in, especially when you're trying to go in any certain direction when it comes to the type of focus you want to have in your investigations, and bring all of those offices under the same sort of mindset. And then you've also got political and jurisdictional issues to deal with, where if it's a U.S. attorney I'm dealing with here in Atlanta who may want to focus on human trafficking, and then I go to the U.S. attorney in the Northern District of North Carolina, and they don't care. Well, not that they don't care about human trafficking, but I got to be careful what I say, right? But that's not their focus. Then you have to kind of work through what the agency wants to focus on, as well as what the U.S. attorney wants to focus on, and your state and local law enforcement partners, where their focus and what their political desires might be.
I'm based in Washington. A lot of the reporting I do is surrounding those sort of nameless, faceless bureaucrats, as our friends on Capitol Hill so affectionately refer to them often. The people that work on a high level, they're setting policy. But you all, and at least my impression is that you all are sort of the face of your agency. You're interacting directly with the constituencies that you serve. Kim, maybe you can speak to this. How important is it to sort of forge relationships in the community, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do disaster response, and I tell my folks, and I tell myself this, is that if the first time that I get your business card or I meet you is during a disaster, then I have not been doing my job. So relationships, and for us to invoke our program, which is for businesses, homeowners, and renters. So when you go through a disaster, get a presidential or agency declaration, we give disaster loans to homeowners, businesses, and renters, and businesses of all sizes, not just small businesses. And so what I do is forge a relationship with all of the emergency managers in every state. And I make it a routine. Me and my team, we go out and we visit all of the regions. Maybe once a year. And if somebody comes in, if we get a new FEMA administrator, we get a new governor, we go out and we talk to them. So building relationships is very key. And that's what, the bureaucrats in Washington want me to do. They want me to get out in my region and make sure that I know who are the power players and that I can get things. Now, and then what's key about it is that we're a small agency, so sometimes we open up business recovery centers. I need the local mayor to give me free space. So when I build these relationships, my folks can go out, we can get free space, and we can open up and help the citizens. So we make it it's one of our strategic objectives is outreach and building relationships.
Nick, again, a little bit different perspective here, but how important is it for you to, as you're trying to strategize on doing your job, that you have relationships built up in the community, that might help you, conduct law enforcement?
Yeah, it's actually oddly extremely important. I was talking to Ken outside earlier, and he was like, I was telling him Homeland Security Investigations is the investigative arm of DHS, and he goes, "Oh, you guys investigate the big stuff," and I jokingly said, "Yeah, if we knock on your door, it's probably not a good day for you." But, in that same sense, for us, it's important that folks understand exactly what it is that we do. So we actually have a thing that we call the Citizens Academy, and we bring in community leaders for what ends up being 6 days, spread out over a couple of months, but they come in for about 4 hours each day, and we walk them through an investigation, obviously tell them about, what we do, let them do some shooting, some physical activity, take them out on surveillance so they can actually see what we do in the field. But talking about what the agency investigates helps in a sense, because I think the love of law enforcement, if you will, ebbs and flows, right? When something bad happens, obviously law enforcement gets a very negative connotation. When something good happens, we're on the positive side. But having folks understand, hey, listen, here are the people that we're going after. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, child molesters, when folks understand what we do, it benefits us in the greater sense. So that's what we do in order to kind of integrate with the community.
And have you had good feedback on that?
Excellent feedback. We did our first Citizens Academy 2 years ago, and then last year when we were looking for participants, we actually had to scale the class down because we had too many folks that reached out. The first year it was us reaching out to the community leaders, trying to find folks to bring in. And once those folks came in and spread the word, the second year it became, I think our goal at the time was to have 20. We ended up with 30. I think we had 70 people that volunteered. And I think this year being the same thing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Now, I think the flip side of this equation where, you're going out and really making changes and building relationships in the community is when those sort of annoying, pesky DC headquarters people are getting in your way. And I do, when I sort of hear about what that is like, how often do you have to take direction from them, and how much independence do you have? And really, how do you build a connection so that there's a back and forth and it's not just top down? Michelle, do you have thoughts on that?
So in our organization, we're a mini Washington, D.C. Office of Assistant Secretary. That's a very large organization, and we're a very small organization, but we're doing the same kinds of activities. We're doing the emergency preparedness, the safety and health, the managing the facilities, the accounting, finance work, the HR work that's just recently been moved into a shared service environment. Same with IT, that's been a shared service environment, and our procurement is moving that way. But if my client agency has an issue with their telephones in Tampa, they come to me to fix it. So if something isn't working, and it may be something that the way our services are evolving that we would have had responsibility for, but now we're partnering with DC. So what we do across our organization and the regional offices is we have collaborative working relationships, and we partner with our DC office, because collaborative working relationships are how we get things done. If there's something that is critical, I'll give you an example of a parking garage unsafe situation in a Columbia office. This was last year, where there were some issues. And we raised that to my assistant secretary level, because we had Department of Labor people, as well as other federal agencies parking in that office. And there were some serious safety concerns that had been raised. So we raised it here, and then we raised it with our GSA partners. We also worked with our Federal Protective Service partners. And in about probably 30 days, we were able to get there were homeless people that were getting into the facility after hours. And there had been some break-ins and some things that were not good in terms of ensuring the safety of the people that were parking there, and they were also federal employees. So those folks were cleaned out. We had a patrol. We got a 24/7 security person that was in that facility that reported to FPS that was in the Strom Thurmond building. And you do that by having relationships, knowing who to call, when to call. Sometimes you can handle things at this level, and then sometimes you have to pop it up. And it's knowing when to do that, because you're working it from both levels. And I think strategic partnerships and collaboration, as Joel was talking about earlier, is how we get our jobs done, particularly in the regional office. And sometimes you have to have a relationship with someone. So if you've got something that you need to turn on a dime, you know who to call, and you know that you've got a good working relationship. As you said, the first time I'm talking to you doesn't need to be when I'm having an issue. I have a relationship with them. They know me. They know my organization. They know what's going on in the region, because I have informed them and educated them about the challenges and the geographical dispersion in the Southeast region. So when the phone call is made, we go exactly to what do we need to do to resolve whatever the issue is.
And as you've transitioned to more centralized and shared services, has that made it easier to forge those relationships? How has that changed the dynamic at all?
It's changed the dynamic in terms of now we have a increased bench strength. So before, where it was just our region, and then we could reach up, now we have a larger bench to pull from. So we're all one, I'll give the Office of Human Resources, we are one Office of Human Resource, and we're not only in the national office, but we're within the 6 regions.
I see. Now, Nick, we were previously discussed that you're in a bit of a unique position in terms of the dual role of sorts that you're sitting in, and I know you've mentioned how you've moved around. So, how do you view this dynamic, and how is this position you're in now giving you a little bit more insight into the relationship between headquarters and where you sit?
Sure. I think, you talked about the pesky Washington people, and I'm like, that's me now. But prior to this, so I'm acting as our assistant director in DC, and so prior to that, being here in Atlanta and dealing with headquarters and constantly trying to manage, as I said, the goals and objectives of headquarters driven down to the field, which sometimes don't match what needs to be done regionally, and balancing those things. And then now in this new role, being that person who's making that call and dealing with. So as far as special agents in charge, we have 30 across the country for our agency. And so as the assistant director, I have to deal with 30 special agents in charge who have the same sort of mindset and mentality that I had 2 months ago when I was here in Atlanta, which was, I'm going to do what I want to do because it's my office and I'm running it and I don't want to really hear from headquarters. And now I have to try to reach out to all those folks across the country who are my friends, who I would normally call and be like, can you believe what headquarters wants us to do? Yes, and now say, hey, it's me again, but I'm asking you to do it. So I actually said this to our director last week. I said, I hope to not be in this position for eternity. At some point, I'd like to go back home, but I also think it's nice to have somebody in the position on a permanent basis, but it also would be a fantastic idea to do like maybe like a quarterly rotation. So every SAC or every special agent in charge came into headquarters and got a feel for what it's like to sit in that chair and to have things coming from the department and from the White House and being pushed down to you that you have to then push out to the field and have a better understanding of what that balance is and why you're doing what you're doing.
Is that something that you see at your agencies at all with employees who go from the region back to headquarters or vice versa, or maybe from one region to another to get a sort of broader perspective? We talked about this a little bit in the last panel. Or if not, is it something that you maybe would like to see more of?
I guess we don't probably have a lot of movement of
Yeah.
people going between headquarters and the regions. It would be a great idea to give some folks, because that's the one thing that I do is that we can say those bureaucrats in DC or what DC told us to do, but I try not to do that. What I try to do is to manage up, and I try to control the message that comes out of DC, and then I try to manage down and say, stay in your lane. Worry about your position and what you're supposed to do, because the folks in DC have a whole lot of skill set and a whole lot of other problems, and they're looking at it from a different lens. So if you stay in your lane and worry about the mission that you have at your level and do that well. And so, but I think it's been great training. What Nick was saying, if we could rotate, especially the managers, we could rotate them into headquarters and out.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, ours is a little bit unique, I think, unlike yours. For us, every first-line manager now has to go through headquarters. So we're either rotating them through headquarters on what we call a TDY, a temporary duty, or they're going through on a permanent, which for our headquarters is a 3 to 5 year tour. But so every one of our first-line managers goes through headquarters and kind of gets a feel and a flavor for what goes on in that setting, which I think helps when they get down to the field.
Right, because you mentioned that sometimes there's that perspective in the field of why are they giving us this direction? But when they spend time there, maybe it helps them understand this is how the process usually works. It's not this is why priorities can change. Yeah.
100%, yeah. And I think again, even a refresher in a sense like this, I think for me is a refresher. I've been through our headquarters multiple times. I did a permanent tour, which was 4 years, and I've been through on several what they call long-term TDYs, which have been over a year in time. So in total, I've spent 6 or 7 years in DC, but you're in DC and you understand what's being done in DC, and then you get out of DC and recover from your PTSD and you start to move, you start to do your thing and you get comfortable in the field and you forget what goes on up there and why things are being done. So I think there's also that sort of aspect of if you can get folks.
Yeah. And I want to add to that, since we're a regional office, right? The same way that if you let that culture grow of DC being separate from a region. Remember, you're a region, so people say, that's what Atlanta said to do, and so you got to really kill it, because it's not just DC, it's not just region to DC, but it's the folks that's out in the other states back to region saying that came out of Atlanta. So you want to create a culture that doesn't, that doesn't promote, a separate. It's all one mission and one team.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about what recruiting challenges you might be seeing at the regional level. Whether that's specific to things that are happening here in Atlanta, or just sort of generally what it's like as you try to find new talent. Michelle, could you speak to a little bit about any issues, challenges that might come up as you're trying to fill holes in your workforce, and how you push through those?
Well, I think the pool of talent that we receive when we get our certificates is good. We have a nice bench to choose from. Right now, with the different budgetary constraints that many of us are facing, I think sometimes the challenge is actually the lag time between when the vacancy occurs and when you're able to fill. And so that's when the art of management really comes into play, as you all know. And you have to look at your organization and the work that you have. What level of position is this? So if I have a manager that's leaving, is this something that we can rotate people through as a developmental assignment? If it's not, if it's a line person that's left, how do I still complete the work tasks that need to be completed without overtaxing the organization, so we don't get to some of those, I couldn't believe that employees did that situation that we talked about earlier this morning. One of the tools we have at Department of Labor is a road detail. And our road detail is an opportunity where we write up the tasks of the job and we post it within our region. And some of these jobs can be done virtually. And the road details for 120 days. And so it's within a Department of Labor program where folks from other agencies can come and do work for my agency and build skills and have an opportunity to see what work is in another organization. And that works very well also. I think the final thing is you do have to be the squeaky wheel when you need to get a position filled. And I've got one right now. I won't tell you how long it's been vacant. And that's when I have my boss is in DC. And when I talk to him, it's on my list. What about this? And I make a phone call. I send the emails. Eventually, I know that I'll get to fill the position. But it's not letting people within the organization that this isn't a critical position. That just because it hasn't been filled for this amount of time doesn't mean that the need isn't there and that we've figured out how to get things done. Otherwise, there is a cost, and there maybe are some things that we'd like to do that we're not doing based on this vacancy.
That 120-day sort of rotation that you mentioned, so that means they leave their existing job behind for a few months and then go do something else entirely?
Well, that's a good question. So that's when you're the supervisor that's going to be getting the detailee, and you have a conversation, it's a negotiation with the losing supervisor. And sometimes what the negotiation is like, I'm the losing supervisor. I really can't afford 100% of the time for 120 days. What if we did Monday, Wednesday, Friday? What if we did, in the mornings or in the afternoons? So there's a negotiation process that goes along. And if I'm the losing supervisor and I have a critical task right now, or somebody has just said, I've won the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes, and I'll be leaving tomorrow, and you've got a whole, then you do have the opportunity to speak with the supervisor, the employee, and say, no, right at this time, I can't afford for you to leave, but let's relook at this opportunity, in another 6 months.
I'm sorry, I'm fascinated by this because I haven't heard of something similar. So I'm just going to ask you one more question. Are they then trained up on the new position, and have you had a lot of success in getting people to be interested in trying to do this detail?
Oh, we have a lot of success across the department. In my particular organization, we've had people come in and work in our finance department and work on the travel card program and how to administer that for our 17 agencies. On our space side, we've had people come in and work on the facilities. So the idea of use the phones in Tampa when the phones in Tampa aren't working. How do you do that? Or we were putting together some fact sheets for our properties across the Southeast region. So you'd have a one-pager with the picture of the property and its lease expiration date, usable square feet, rentable, those kinds of facts. And our road detail put those together for all our properties. So sometimes you get a project, sometimes it's just help that you need with a specific task, but it's been very well received across the department. And this is something that all of our 17 agencies have the opportunity to participate in.
Oh, very interesting. So I want to see if there's any questions out in the audience because we're running a little bit low on time here. Right here, just if you don't mind waiting for the microphone, it's coming right now.
Good morning, Paula Randler, U.S. Forest Service. The USDA Forest Service has taken the system of detailers, in my opinion, to its absurd conclusion where we would have a series of 120-day detailers for a year to 3 to 4 years. And so in that time, there's not a permanent hire. There's not necessarily time and staffing for that person to really get up to speed in 120 days and become effective in that position. I'm wondering if for those of you who have a culture of detailing, do you see effective prioritization from your leadership, and do you see that there's a way to make detailers work and actually carry projects through time?
Well, for us, so I told you about the detail that our group supervisors do. We have a division within headquarters called operations, and operations basically oversees the field. And so when the folks are detailed in, for example, I have an agent from Atlanta who's detailed in to operations now, but he is overseeing the Atlanta region. So at the headquarters level. So he's in DC, working in the operations center, overseeing the region that he works in, and basically reporting back on taskings that come out of headquarters to the field, organizing those and bringing them back in. So in a sense, he's still engaged with his community, if you will. And so it kind of benefits us in the long run. We have somebody who's in DC fulfilling a need, but is also engaged in our office. So I think the way that we do it is unique. That's the way it works across the country. So I think it's effective overall.
And they're not just a stranger to the entire...
Exactly. They have an invested interest in what's going on. So.
Any other questions? All right, Nick and Kim, I want to bring you in on this topic of recruiting and maybe expand it a little bit based on what Michelle was saying. A, are you having any challenges with recruiting or filling vacancies? And B, what are those conversations like in terms of ensuring that you have appropriate resources? Is that something that you are struggle with at all with headquarters?
Yeah, well, I would tell you that, all of us in federal employment know we are buying the USA jobs and the federal hiring method. But I would tell you that the first thing, we struggle in some positions to get the right employee into the position. One of them is information technology. You gotta dedicate the time and redo the PDs, the position descriptions. You just gotta redo them because we had some PDs that were 20 years old. So what IT tech 20 years ago is not IT tech today. So you gotta put the effort in and rewriting those PDs, making sure the specialized experience that you post on USA Job is bringing you the right quality candidates. That's a management effort that you got to put into it with your HR, is to rewrite those PDs to get the kind of quality candidates and put the effort in it that you want. Then the other thing is that don't hire the best of the worst. You know, I mean, if you put a job out there and you don't get the right candidate, as a manager, you got to say, no, I'm not going to hire anybody off of that cert. And because I don't have a candidate that fills the position. A lot of us, we get pushed to hire people just because we had an announcement out. So I think, really looking at your PDs and make sure they evolve with the organization. And then if you do that, you can get the right candidate, because we get 300 people to apply for one position. Out of the 50 that make the search, none of them are qualified for the position. So that's because we didn't put the interview that didn't match the position description. Yeah. So those are critical components.
So when you're going through that process and you realize we have to rewrite this description, is that mean involving not just HR, but the technical experts who really can tell you this is what this job will look like, and this is...
Exactly, and I'm gonna cover any HR folks in there. I mean, if you stand by and let HR write all of your PDs, then you're not getting the type of candidate you want. So managers just got to be involved in every aspect, especially the specialized experience that pops on USA Jobs. I mean, you got to make sure that that's getting you the type of candidate, or not disqualifying the type of candidate that you want.
Nick, you have any thoughts on this discussion? Recruiting or fighting for resources?
So yeah, ours is, again, I think a little unique. I mean, when Ken just said, one position, 300 applicants. So last time we opened up what we call a recruitment, it was open for 48 hours and we had 11,000 applicants. Oh. So,
Wow.
I don't know. A lot of people want to be agents. I don't know. It's 4/5 of our workforce is our special agents. So that's a large cadre of what we do. And I think when you take in military folks, other law enforcement agencies, and just everyday citizens, there are a lot of folks that are looking to transition into federal law enforcement, into being a special agent. So when you have that many applicants, it becomes a difficult, again, weeding through those to find your folks. And generally, it used to be that was done out of Dallas. Now for us, we have a unique challenge. It's changed, and we have what we call a direct hire now. So a direct hire means that I can receive a resume as a special agent in charge. And when the announcement opens, I can simply say, oh, I think Ken's qualified. Here's Ken's information, send it into headquarters, and I can hire Ken. Sounds great, right? Yeah. Except now that folks know that that's the case, you have 600, resumes in your inbox, and everyone in their, I'm not kidding, but so many folks and their sisters that are writing you saying, hey, Nick, we met the other day, I wanted to give you this applicant, and trying to look at all of those resumes. And it's a balance, right? I came into federal law enforcement from the private sector with no law enforcement background, no military, no anything, which I think was great. And I think we also have folks that have military background, that have prior law enforcement, and that's great as well. But trying to balance that and pick up folks that, bring in skill set from all aspects and not just the same typical type of person. We could have 100 former Navy SEALs working as special agents, and that would be great, but it'd also be detrimental to what we do as an agency. So.
If there's still no questions, I'll just keep going. Michelle, you brought up something interesting earlier that I wanted to circle back to. You talked about sometimes you have to be the squeaky wheel, but if I understood what you were saying correctly, sometimes it's about picking your battles. Is that right? So, you don't want to just go bringing every problem you have up the chain. Is that Am I reading that right?
Well, I mean, I think as you know, as managers, we have to be an advocate for our organization. And whether I'm a first level manager and my folks need training and it's time for us to do the training budget, or there's a visit that we need to make out to one of our locations, I need to advocate that. And as we move up the management chain, then as a leader of a regional organization, I have to advocate for my region and what I need in terms of my staff and my resources, whether that's filling a vacancy or something I'm very proud of that we're rolling out next week. It only took me 3 years to get it. We're getting an access control system for our office space. I am so excited. We are officed in the Sam Nunn Federal Center. As you know, that's a public building. And our doors were open because we service 17 client agencies. We need to be able to, can come in, but as the workforce changes and our workplace changes, safety and security of our folks that work for us is very, very important. And due to budgetary, budgetary, so all the heads nod. I was the squeaky wheel. I kept bringing it up on my monthly budget meetings, and we almost got it, but then the bid came in way high. You know how that works. And we were finally able to get it. So next week we're doing training and we're rolling it out. So you do have to persevere. You do have to make the case. And as you said, make sure that you're picking the right battles. Because when I do make the phone call to somebody in DC, they know I have an issue and they know that I'm calling for a good reason, and then they'll figure out what they can do in order to support us out here in the region. Having those good working relationships is key, and I think all three of us have spoken to that this morning.
Well, 3 years, that's pretty quick by federal government standards, so I applaud you. I'll have to leave it there. We're out of time, but thank you very much to our panelists for that.